Are y'all ready for this? Yeah, you're feeling it a little bit. Luckily, a lot of you guys are friendly, familiar faces, so I know that this message is something I've already talked to you about before. So I want to respect the 15-minute timeline, so I'm going to be tied a little bit more to my notes than I usually am in public speaking, but thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to share this conversation with you. So I've been working at the West Michigan Environmental Action Council for almost 4 years, a little over 4 years now, as the Community Activism Manager. In that time, I couldn't help but recognize that not only are there few people, that environmentalists are predominantly white. Not only that, but also the fact that environmentalists aren't very comfortable or good at talking about race. So it's my hope today that we can challenge some of those assumptions, maybe learn about some new opportunities to grow your race equity engagement. But I need to say something first. I'm white. I'm white talking about race. I need to call out and acknowledge that I hold privilege from being a white member of this community. I'm sharing my perspective coming from a place of privilege, okay? Acknowledging that, I think that it is fair to say that I hope to have an honest conversation with you today, and certainly into the future. So, we all have lived experiences from when we were growing up. This is me and my dad at Mohican State Park in Ohio. I grew up interacting with nature, being outside, instilled with a sense to value and appreciate nature. As an adult, though, it makes it really easy for me to call on those experiences that I had growing up. So it's really easy for me to say protect the environment because I was raised thinking about the environment and interacting with the environment. But I can't assume that people are going to want to protect the environment for the same reasons that I want to protect the environment. I'm challenging you all today to think about environmentalism a little differently, broaden our understanding of it, expand our understanding of what an environment is and who an environmentalist is. Have you guys seen this number before? Right, 2042. This is the year that the U.S. Census Bureau is calling that our white majority will shift into a non-white majority. So if we say that environmentalists are mostly white, then even past moral sentiment, this is a sustainability issue of the movement itself, right? We're challenged to become more relevant to more people, to become more effective and more accessible. Now, I'll be honest that over the last few years of working on race equity at WMEAC, I hear things like, well, Annie, this is great, but Black people don't care. Black people don't care about the environment. Besides the fact about how offensive and ridiculous this statement is, it's also wrong, right? Last year, there was a study came out from an organization called Green for All, communities of climate change and communities of color. They polled nationally, including Michigan, minority voters to talk about their perceptions about climate change and climate policy in particular. 68% of those polled, of those minority voters polled nationally, said that climate change is an issue we need to deal with right now. I don't think that we can get those numbers if we polled West Michigan right now. So, you know, are environmentalists really white? No, absolutely not. It's that the modern environmental movement hasn't been able to encompass and integrate the interests of that 68%. So the solutions here, I promise, are integrated within all of our work, whether you're a for-profit, a brewery, a university, a community organization, a government, whatever. This is going to require intentionality from all of our work. I don't mean to say this narrative, I'm not here today to demonize our work. I'm here today instead to share a narrative to recognize how our own priorities and our own practices as a mainstream environmental movement have perpetuated racial exclusion, okay? But it's when we take ownership of that when we see those opportunities to change and to fix it. So, you know, why aren't there more people of color in our mainstream environmental movement? Some of it has to do with historical context. I'm going back, right? Think about slavery. what it meant to tend the land for the master. Think about what it means for a slave to go into the woods and not come back out, right? Think about our food culture today and how it's developed and the impacts it's having on our Hispanic and Latino communities. Think about our Native American population, right? The original environmentalists. Our modern environmental movement, our mainstream environmental movement, isn't adequately capturing the voices of even our Native American populations, right? We can't ignore that our history and the decisions that we've made are impacting how minority populations may be interacting with the environment, and especially the environmental movement, right? It's all different, coming from a different place. This slide looks terrible. It looked great on my version, so I apologize for it looking awful here. This came from, one thing we do know is that, so if you can see, there's 2 lines for each job. This is a breakdown of where white and non-white employees of environmental organizations go across. So despite the fact that we see really low numbers in leadership, we also see that people of color are typically hired into back of office or out of office positions. So hired into the accounting, into human resourcing, or sent out of the office to do community outreach, community organizing. Now, I wish that we could see this last one. It's on the last slide. It's on the last end because of how small it is, but that says diversity manager. It's the only one that has more non-white employees than white employees. But even in this sample size, which was 107 organizations, there were less than 10 total diversity managers here. So using WMEAC as an example, we've been around for a long time. I'm really transparent about our work here. We're certainly fall in line with these numbers. We were intentional about hiring a person of color into our staff. We want more leadership to be representative of our Grand Rapids and West Michigan community. So in 2012, when we created our IDEAL initiative, which is our inclusion and diversity initiative, the first thing we did, updated our policies and procedures, in particular, our job dissemination. So where were we sending out our jobs? We came up with a great list. A really great list, really comprehensive list, all different places we can post jobs, except this chart came from the State of Diversity in Environmental Organizations. It's a report that came out from the University of Michigan by Dr. Dorcita Taylor. This happened last summer and this was released. What they told us in a very wonderful academic framework was that we don't rely on where we post the jobs for hiring, we rely on word of mouth for job dissemination. And so even if I posted this job that we have at WMEAC in 50 different places, we're still gonna depend more heavily on word of mouth. So that means that I need to have advocates who are from our marginalized communities, who can speak on behalf of my organization and can speak with us to do their own advocating for that job position in their own networks, whether that's formal networks or informal networks. But please, please, please don't just take my experience that I had at WMEAC. There are opportunities here for your organization to read the report. It's a wonderful one. There's even an executive summary, but the 100 pages is worth it. Hire a consultant. We've partnered with Progressive Strategies Plus, go through something called Partners for a Racism-Free Community Assessment. They're gonna ask you some really challenging questions that are gonna push you to think about how your own organization may be treating race equity a little bit differently. But simply put, the excuse that people of color just aren't applying for my jobs isn't a viable excuse anymore, because we're a lot smarter than that. So, how do you get people of color to advocate for you? Guess what? It's that same tenet that we keep hearing all day. You build a trusted, genuine relationship with people outside of your network, okay? More importantly, when you're engaging with a community, with an organization that you don't have a built-in trust relationship with already, guess what you have to do? You got to come to the table without an agenda. Whether it's a person or an organization, it's a relationship building process. There are simply times that you have to be present to listen and to support, and you can't be promoting your own agenda within that discussion, right? You need to be present and listen. So this right here shares that you can see pretty clearly within the last 3 years, this is also from the State of Diversity report, in the last 3 years, we're seeing a vast majority of the environmental organizations nationally had not done any collaboration with our ethnic minority and within their own ethnic minority group organization types, right? That's a lot of people. But when we start to recognize environmental issues as systemic issues, we see that there are very clear connections throughout all the other social justice issues, right? They're complementary, not competitive. Now, of course, when you hear me say that, you're thinking, Annie, I don't have time. Time is my most valuable resource. I don't have time to come to the table without an agenda. You need your leadership commitment. I'm fortunate that I work for an organization that I have leadership commitment at a lot of different levels to let me spend time just to build relationships, and also are open-minded enough to understand our issues and have it be challenged to think about it in a different way. This is about integration throughout the organization, not add-on. Angelina's not here, right? I don't know if she's live streaming. If she is, she can call me later about this. Have you guys heard of white knighting before? You heard this term? Riding in valiantly on your white horse to save the princess in distress. This is an outreach practice that environmental organizations have relied on in their attempt to integrate and collaborate with an ethnic minority group or ethnic minority community. So ask yourself always, is my outreach harmful or is it helpful? Instead of working in a community, we want to work with the community, right? Pretty simple. There's always going to be common priorities though. When you find that you're building trusted relationships with people and you're being present and you're coming to the table without an agenda, people are starting to become a little more obvious, a little more open about their work, and you'll find a lot of commonalities between everyone's work there. So this was our attempt, this is our approach. It's called IDEAL, Inclusion and Development of Environmental Allies and Leaders. I've been working on this for about 3 years now. We have a trusted group of advisors who guide me and check me. They make recommendations and we listen. We have a growing scholar program that's hired 6 different scholar students over the last 2 years to push forward this initiative, We've also done a lot of listening ourselves. We hosted 25 deep listening sessions, focus groups, perception surveys, all to listen to organizations that we haven't listened to before, and in a way so that we can learn what their perspective is on environmental issues. So our racial minority communities will be and are disproportionately impacted by climate change. I don't know if you see this. I've seen this rather obvious and alarming dynamic created here, right? So over here, we now know that our minority communities are going to be disproportionately impacted by climate change. We also know that there are very few people of color within our environmental organizations who are actually making those priorities for us, right? But then we also remember that there is this interest and passion to support environmentalism from a policy standpoint. So why is this disconnect happening? When we're in this conversation together, we have events like this all the time as an environmental community. We must include the full community. Always challenge yourself to apply a race equity lens. Think about it, like if you hear that a community wants good jobs and they have subpar housing, applying a race equity lens to our sustainability approach is developing a pipeline for home repair from within that community, having them put in insulation, which is going to better the indoor air quality, and then having them with a good job and reducing their energy bills, blah, 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 everyone's winning. This is also an example of what this looks like in practice. This is a map. The color isn't coming up clearly, but this is showing where our non-white populations live in the city of Grand Rapids. The dots that you can't see because of the color is showing asthma prevalence in Greater Grand Rapids. I've been a part of a collaborative now for since 2013. Why asthma, right? Asthma is the most prevalent chronic disease amongst children today. Asthma is also a symptom of environmental injustices. Things like traffic and highways and fossil fuel combustion and poor indoor air quality in daycares or schools or churches, even outdoor particulate matter. These are all triggers and they're all environmental variables. So it's an issue that I'm concerned about as an environmentalist now. When we use the race equity lens, we can understand that reducing exposures to triggers is going to reduce those asthma attacks, right? And we can think about where to focus preventatively when we're trying to target and work with those vulnerable populations and communities. Always ask where you can apply the race equity lens. So I'm challenging us all today to do something a little different, right? We need to start meeting communities where they are. Historical environmentalism promotes land conservation, land protection. Modern environmentalism talks about really far away things like melting ice caps and polar bears. These are important things. Don't throw tomatoes at me. These are very important topics. But if you're not already in the environmental movement, you don't already understand those issues, it's less likely that you're going to be relating to those issues and support those issues. The environmental movement, in my opinion, has a challenge to become more relevant to more people. This even expands past race, right? It's time to stop pushing people where we want them to go, and it's time to start meeting people where they are. And I believe only then, that's really when we can move forward together. Thank you.